you will discover what Carl Jung called the hidden danger of loneliness, a psychological phenomenon that is silently destroying the lives of even those who seem to have everything. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly how to transform your loneliness from an enemy into a powerful ally. Prepare for a journey into the most intimate realm of human experience. You will understand why modern loneliness is unlike any loneliness our species has ever experienced, why it is literally altering our psychological makeup, and most importantly, how Jung discovered that there is a form of loneliness that is not only harmless, it is essential to becoming who you truly are. But before we dive into this fascinating psychological territory, I need to warn you, what Jung discovered about loneliness goes against everything modern society has taught you. He realized that there isn't just one kind of loneliness, there are two, and confusing one with the other can be devastating to your mental health. Are you ready to find out which type you're experiencing? Carl Jung wasn't just an observer of the human mind. He was someone who deeply experienced the psychological dilemmas he studied. Born in Switzerland in 1875, Jung grew up an introspective child, often feeling out of place even among his family. This personal experience of loneliness would lead him, decades later, to one of the most important discoveries in modern psychology. In the early 20th century, Jung observed a disturbing phenomenon in his office. Patients came to him reporting a form of suffering that was difficult to define. It wasn't classic depression. It wasn't common anxiety. It was something more subtle, more pervasive. It was a chronic sense of disconnection that persisted even when these people were surrounded by family, friends, and coworkers. They lived in society, but felt like strangers in their own world. Jung began to realize that modernization was creating an entirely new kind of human isolation. For the first time in history, people could be physically close, but psychologically more distant than ever before. He observed that the more socially connected his patients seemed to be, the deeper their sense of existential loneliness. But Jung's truly revolutionary discovery was realizing that not all solitude is created equal. He identified two completely different forms of solitary experience, what he called pathological isolation and creative solitude. The first was destructive, leading to psychological fragmentation, depression, and even mental breakdown. The second was transformative, leading to what he called individuation, the process of becoming truly who you are. Jung discovered that most people were living in the first type without even realizing it. They had learned to fill every quiet moment with external stimuli, with entertainment, with superficial interactions, with compulsive work. But beneath this apparent connection, a deep emptiness was growing, an emptiness that Jung perceived to be simultaneously the greatest danger and the greatest opportunity of the modern human experience. What made this discovery even more fascinating was that Jung realized that many of the most sociable and successful people were precisely those who suffered most deeply from pathological isolation. They had become so adept at performing connection that they had completely lost the ability to experience genuine connection, both with others and with themselves. But what exactly did Jung mean by hidden danger? How could loneliness be functioning as an unseen, destructive force in your life? And why is the way modern society deals with loneliness actually making it worse? The hidden danger Jung identified in modern loneliness isn't the fact of being physically alone. The danger lies in something much more subtle and devastating: the progressive loss of the ability to be authentically with oneself. Jung realized that when people constantly avoid their own company, they begin to become strangers to themselves. And when you become a stranger to yourself, your entire psychological structure begins to fragment. Let's be specific about how this happens. Imagine a successful executive whom Jung treated in the 1920s. Outwardly, she had it all: a brilliant career, an active social circle, and a constantly packed schedule. But she arrived at Jung's office reporting a feeling she described as living someone else's life. When Jung investigated further, he discovered that this woman couldn't be alone for more than a few minutes without experiencing overwhelming anxiety. She filled every free moment with activities, commitments, and entertainment. The result? She had completely lost touch with her own desires, values, and intuitions. Her decisions were based on what others expected, what seemed socially appropriate, what would generate approval. She was living a completely external life, guided by other people's expectations, because she had lost the ability to connect with her own inner voice. Jung realized that this was not an isolated case. It was a silent epidemic. Jung identified that the hidden danger of modern loneliness operates through three devastating psychological mechanisms. First, the escape from intimacy with oneself. When you constantly avoid being alone with your own thoughts and feelings, you gradually lose the ability to process experiences deeply. Jung observed that his patients suffering from pathological isolation had a common characteristic. They lived only on the surface of their own lives. Significant events occurred, but they were not truly absorbed, processed, or integrated. They accumulated experiences, but did not develop wisdom. For example, a businessman Jung followed had built a financial empire, traveled the world, married, and had children. But when Jung asked what these experiences truly meant to him, the man was completely lost. He had lived all this automatically, without ever stopping to truly absorb and understand the meaning of his own experiences. The result? A chronic feeling of emptiness, as if life were passing him by without truly touching him. Second, the loss of the intuition function. Jung discovered that intuition, our ability to perceive patterns, possibilities, and non-obvious meanings, only functions properly when we have regular access to inner silence. When we are constantly bombarded by external stimuli, our intuitive function literally atrophies. It's like a muscle that stops being used. An artist Jung treated illustrates this perfectly. She had been extremely creative in her youth but had gradually lost her ability to create original works. When Jung investigated, he discovered that she had developed a deep aversion to silence and solitude. Whenever she began to feel that inner space necessary for creativity to emerge, she would immediately turn on the radio, call someone, or go outside to distract herself. Her creativity had literally died from lack of psychological breathing space. Third, the fragmentation of identity. Perhaps the most dangerous aspect Jung identified is how the constant escape from solitude leads to identity fragmentation. When you don't have regular time to integrate your experiences, to reflect on who you are becoming, to process change and growth, you begin to live as multiple disconnected people. Jung documented the case of a politician who had become so dependent on external approval and constant stimulation that he literally no longer knew who he was when he wasn't performing a social role. At home, alone, he would fall into existential panic. He couldn't make simple decisions, didn't know what he truly liked or wanted, and felt like a collection of masks with no real person behind them. The vicious cycle of constant stimulation. Jung realized that the hidden danger of modern loneliness creates a devastating vicious cycle. The more you avoid your own company, the more uncomfortable you become with yourself. The more uncomfortable you become, the more you need external stimulation to feel alive. The more dependent you become on external stimulation, the more you lose the ability to generate meaning and satisfaction internally. It's a cycle that can lead to complete psychological dependence on external sources of validation and entertainment. But Jung didn't stop at simply identifying the problem. He discovered that there is a completely different way to experience loneliness, one that is not only not dangerous, but is absolutely essential for healthy psychological development. The difference between these two forms of loneliness can determine whether you live a life of meaning or a life of quiet despair. Jung developed practical methods to distinguish between what he called pathological isolation and creative solitude. The difference isn't just how you feel when you're alone, it's how this experience affects your ability to live an authentic and meaningful life. I'll give you precise tools to identify which type of loneliness is dominating your life. Practice Test 1. The Authentic Presence Test. First, try this experiment immediately after watching this video. Set aside 20 minutes to be completely alone, without any electronic devices, books, music, or any form of entertainment or distraction. Just you and your thoughts. Sit comfortably and observe what happens internally. If you're experiencing pathological isolation, you'll experience some or all of these signs: increasing anxiety after the first few minutes, a compulsive need to pick up your phone or do anything to escape the moment, thoughts that obsessively spin in circles without getting anywhere, a feeling of emptiness or not knowing who you are when you're not interacting with others or consuming content, increasing irritability or even panic. If you have access to creative solitude, you will notice an initial feeling of discomfort that gradually transforms into calm, thoughts that start superficially but eventually deepen into interesting insights or reflections, a feeling of coming home with yourself, emerging curiosity about your own mental and emotional processes, creative ideas or solutions to problems that arise naturally. Practice test 2. External dependency mapping. Jung observed that people trapped in pathological isolation develop subtle dependencies on external validation and stimulation. Take an honest look at your past week. How many decisions did you make based on what others would think versus what you genuinely wanted? How many times did you check social media, messages, or seek entertainment when silence made you uncomfortable? How many conversations did you have that truly nourished you versus conversations that were just social filler? If more than 70% of your answers indicate external dependence, Jung would say you're experiencing pathological isolation disguised as social connection. You're using other people and activities like a drug to avoid confronting your own inner experience. Practice test 3. The quality of your relationships. Jung discovered that pathological isolation paradoxically leads to more superficial relationships while healthy solitude leads to deeper connections. Analyze your closest relationships. Do people truly know who you are beneath your social masks? Are you able to be vulnerable and authentic with them? Are your relationships based on shared activities or genuine mutual understanding? People living in pathological isolation often report having many acquaintances but few true friends. They feel like they're constantly performing, even with people close to them, because they've lost touch with who they truly are when they're not performing. Practice test 4. Your relationship to creativity and purpose. Jung noted that pathological isolation kills creativity and a sense of purpose, while creative solitude fuels them. Reflect. When was the last time you had a truly original idea? When did you feel connected to a sense of purpose or direction that came from within, not from external expectations? Can you identify your unique values and desires, separate from what others expect of you? If you struggle to answer these questions, or if your answers feel empty or artificial, Jung would suggest that you are suffering from chronic pathological isolation. Practice test 5. The emotional presence test. Jung observed that people with pathological isolation often disconnect from their own emotional lives. They may feel numb or experience emotions superficially. Try this exercise. Try to identify exactly what you're feeling right now, beyond good or bad. Can you distinguish between different emotional nuances? Do you allow uncomfortable emotions to exist without immediately trying to fix or distract yourself from them? Pathological isolation often manifests as a disconnection from one's own inner emotional landscape. The person becomes a stranger to their own emotions. Advanced warning signs. Jung identified some more subtle signs of pathological isolation that many people fail to recognize. You feel more yourself when you are performing social or professional roles than when you are alone. You have difficulty making decisions without consulting others or seeking external validation. You feel anxious or lost on weekends or vacations when there is less external structure. You feel like you're watching your own life instead of living it fully. You feel like you're constantly trying to catch up to some version of yourself that always seems just out of reach. The paradox of modern connectivity. Jung predicted a phenomenon we clearly see today: people more connected than ever through technology, but simultaneously experiencing unprecedented levels of psychological isolation. He realized that constant superficial connection can be even more damaging than complete isolation, because it creates an illusion of connection that prevents a person from seeking the genuine solitude necessary for psychological development. If you recognize the signs of pathological isolation, don't despair. Jung discovered not only the dangers of modern loneliness, but also the antidote. There is a way to transform your relationship with solitude from destructive to deeply nourishing. The difference lies in understanding what Jung called sacred solitude and learning to cultivate it consciously. Jung didn't study pathological isolation out of academic curiosity. He was deeply concerned about the devastating consequences he observed in patients who lived for years or decades escaping their own company. The consequences weren't just psychological discomfort. They were fundamental changes in personality structure that could lead to the complete fragmentation of the sense of self. Consequence 1. The death of authentic individuality. The first and most serious consequence Jung identified is what he called the dissolution of individuality. When you live constantly guided by external stimuli and validation, you gradually lose the ability to generate internal direction. Your personality becomes a collage of outside expectations, social trends, and performed roles. but there is no longer a coherent individual essence behind it. Jung documented the case of a 45-year-old lawyer who arrived at his office in a state of profound existential crisis. This man had built a successful career, a seemingly stable family, and a respectable social reputation, but he reported to Jung a terrifying feeling. "I don't know who I am when I'm not being what others expect me to be." For decades, he had defined himself entirely through external roles: competent lawyer, provider husband, responsible father, respected member of the community. But when he was alone, he felt as if no one was truly there. What made this case even more revealing was discovering that this man couldn't make simple decisions when he was alone. What program to watch, what food to eat, how to spend a free afternoon. His ability to generate authentic preferences had completely atrophied. He had become what Jung called an empty persona, a social mask without a real person behind it. Consequence 2. Deep existential depression. Jung distinguished between ordinary clinical depression and what he called existential depression, a form of despair that emerges when a person loses connection with their sense of meaning and authentic purpose. This form of depression is particularly insidious because it does not respond well to conventional symptom-focused treatments, as the root cause is a disconnection from one's own essence. A patient Jung treated illustrates this dramatically. She was a successful socialite, constantly surrounded by people, always busy with events and activities. Outwardly, her life seemed vibrant and full, but internally, she reported a feeling she described as starving in the middle of a feast. All the external stimulation could not fill an inner void that was constantly growing. Jung discovered that this woman had completely lost the ability to derive meaning from her own experiences. She could describe events in detail, but she couldn't articulate what they meant to her personally. Her life had become a sequence of events with no coherent narrative or connecting purpose. The result was a form of depression she described as being alive but not living. Consequence 3. Fragmentation of memory and identity. Jung observed that chronic pathological isolation leads to a disturbing psychological phenomenon: the fragmentation of autobiographical memory. When you don't have regular time to process and integrate experiences, your memory becomes a disorganized collection of events with no coherent narrative connection. A businessman Jung followed reported a symptom that initially seemed impossible. He could recall specific details of important events in his life: graduation, marriage, birth of children, professional successes, but he could not recall how he felt during these events or why they were important to him. It was as if he were an outside observer of his own life, able to report facts, but unable to access emotional experience and personal meaning. Jung realized that this happens because processing experiences into meaning requires time and reflective solitude. Without this processing, experiences are stored as raw data, not as integrated memories that form a coherent narrative of who you are and how you got to where you are. Consequence 4. Inability to have true intimacy. One of Jung's most surprising discoveries was that pathological isolation, paradoxically, renders a person incapable of forming genuine, intimate connections with others. When you don't know who you truly are, you can't reveal who you truly are. The result is relationships based entirely on personas and social performances. Jung treated a couple on the brink of divorce after 15 years of marriage. During therapy, a devastating pattern emerged. Both partners had become so dependent on external validation and stimulation that they had never truly known each other. They could describe each other's preferences, habits, and behavioral traits, but they couldn't articulate who their partner truly was as a unique person: their deep values, genuine fears, authentic dreams, the essence of their individuality. Even more disturbing, when Jung asked each to describe who they were beyond their social roles, they were both completely lost. They had spent 15 years living together, but they were two strangers inhabiting the same space, each performing the role of spouse, without ever revealing or even knowing who they truly were behind the performance. Consequence 5. Systematic self-sabotage. Jung identified that people living in pathological isolation often develop patterns of self-sabotage that are completely inexplicable from a logical standpoint. They destroy relationships that are going well, abandon projects that were about to succeed, and make decisions that clearly go against their own stated interests. Jung realized that this happens because when you lose connection with your own essence, you also lose the ability to discern what you truly want versus what you think you should want. The result is a life built on false foundations that eventually collapse through unconscious self-sabotage. A musician Jung treated exemplifies this perfectly. This man had spent years building a musical career based on what was commercially viable and socially acceptable, completely disconnected from his own authentic artistic voice. When he was finally on the verge of achieving the success he had sought, he systematically sabotaged every opportunity, arriving late for important auditions, fighting with producers, making artistically destructive choices. Jung discovered that this musician's unconscious was protecting his authentic artistic integrity by sabotaging a success built on a false foundation. Self-sabotage was a distorted form of self-preservation. The modern silent epidemic Jung, writing in the 1920s and 1930s, predicted with frightening accuracy what we see today, an epidemic of pathological isolation disguised as social connection. He realized that the more connected a society became through technology and complex social structures, the greater the risk of people losing connection with themselves. But Jung was no pessimist. He discovered that there is a powerful antidote to pathological isolation. More than that, he identified that there is a form of solitude that is not only harmless, it is absolutely essential to becoming a complete, creative, and authentic person. The difference lies in learning to distinguish between running away from yourself and finding yourself. Jung discovered that there is a completely different way to experience solitude, one he considered not only beneficial, but essential to what he called individuation, the process of becoming truly who you are. This revolutionary discovery fundamentally changed how we understand the relationship between loneliness and mental health. The fundamental difference: escape versus encounter. The crucial distinction Jung identified isn't whether you're physically alone or accompanied. The difference lies in your intention and attitude toward the experience of loneliness. In pathological isolation, you're running away from uncomfortable emotions, from personal responsibility, from aspects of yourself that you find unacceptable. In creative solitude, you're moving closer, consciously seeking to find, know, and integrate who you truly are. Jung documented this difference through the case of two writers he treated simultaneously. The first writer lived in constant isolation, but used this isolation to avoid confronting his own limitations, fears, and responsibilities. He wrote compulsively, but his writing was a form of escape from reality, not an engagement with it. The result: superficial work, chronic anxiety, and destructive relationships. The second writer also spent long periods alone, but he used this solitude to delve deeply into his own experience, process complex emotions, and explore challenging ideas. His solitude was intentional, structured, and focused on growth. The result: work of extraordinary depth, growing inner peace, and intimate and authentic relationships. The difference was not in the quantity of alone time, but in the quality of intention during that time. The 4 pillars of creative solitude. Jung identified 4 distinctive characteristics of healthy solitude that transform it from a destructive experience into a transformative force. First pillar: conscious presence with yourself. In creative solitude, you're not trying to escape yourself. You're consciously choosing to spend time with the most important person in your life, you. Jung observed that people who master this pillar develop a quality he called inner presence, the ability to be genuinely interested and engaged with their own mental and emotional processes. A businesswoman Jung mentored completely transformed her life when she learned this skill. Previously, she filled every free moment with compulsive activities. Jung taught her to set aside 30 minutes a day for what he called meetings with herself, structured time to simply observe and be interested in what was happening in her inner landscape. Within 6 months, she reported profound changes, clearer decisions, more authentic relationships, and emerging creativity in her work. Second pillar: integrative processing of experiences. Jung discovered that creative solitude always involves what he called psychological digestion, the conscious process of transforming raw experiences into integrated wisdom. Instead of accumulating experiences, you process them, find patterns, extract meaning, and integrate lessons. A Dr. Jung treated illustrates this process beautifully. This man had spent years accumulating technical knowledge and professional experience, but he felt chronically empty and disconnected from his work. Jung taught him to use periods of solitude to reflect not only on what had happened in his day, but on what those experiences meant to him as a person. What instances touched him and why? What interactions revealed something about his values? How did his work connect with his sense of greater purpose? In 1 year, this doctor not only became more effective professionally, but developed a renewed passion for his career, seeing it not as a series of tasks but as an expression of his deepest values. Third pillar, constructive internal dialogue. Jung observed that creative solitude always involves the development of what he called the transcendent function, the ability to have a productive internal dialogue between different aspects of your personality. Rather than being dominated by a repetitive mental monologue, you learn to facilitate internal conversations that lead to insights and growth. An artist Jung mentored exemplifies this process. She had spent years plagued by destructive self-criticism during periods of solitude. Jung taught her to transform this internal criticism into constructive dialogue. Rather than simply judging her work as good or bad, she learned to ask, "What is this piece trying to express? What part of me is emerging through this creation? How can I honor that expression while also refining it?" The result was not only more authentic and powerful art, but also a completely transformed relationship with herself, from destructive critic to compassionate inner mentor. Fourth pillar, connection with transcendent purpose. Jung discovered that truly creative solitude always eventually connects with something greater than the individual ego. You don't become narcissistically focused on yourself. You use self-knowledge as a portal to connect with purposes, values, and meanings that transcend your immediate personal concerns. A businessman, Jung observed, demonstrates this process. Initially, this man used solitude only to plan business strategies and solve practical problems. Jung encouraged him to expand this practice to include reflections on how his work connected to larger values, how he could contribute to something meaningful beyond his own success. Gradually, this entrepreneur began to see his business not just as a means of making money, but as a vehicle for creating genuine value for others, expressing his creativity, and contributing to communities. Paradoxically, this shift in focus from purely personal to transcendent not only improved his personal satisfaction but also made his business more successful. The process of gradual transformation. Jung emphasized that the transition from pathological isolation to creative solitude does not happen overnight. It is a gradual process that requires patience, conscious intention, and often guidance.
He identified typical stages in this transformation. Stage 1. Initial discomfort. When you first attempt intentional solitude, you will likely experience anxiety, boredom, or resistance. Jung saw this as normal and necessary. It's the process of detoxifying from dependence on external stimulation. Stage 2. Emergence of repressed content. As you become more comfortable with inner silence, emotions, memories, and aspects of your personality that have been repressed begin to emerge.
This may be temporarily uncomfortable, but Jung saw it as profoundly healing. Stage 3. Development of inner observation. You begin to develop the ability to observe your own mental and emotional processes with curiosity rather than judgment. This is a transformative skill that Jung considered essential for psychological growth. Stage 4. Integration and synthesis. Eventually, you develop the ability to use solitude to integrate experiences, generate insights, and connect with authentic purpose. At this stage, alone time becomes deeply nourishing rather than threatening. But how exactly do you make this transition? Jung developed specific, practical methods that you can begin implementing immediately to transform your relationship with loneliness from destructive to profoundly transformative. Jung wasn't just a theorist. He was a practical clinician who developed specific methods to help people transform their relationship with loneliness. The methods I'll share with you have been tested over decades of clinical practice and refined through work with hundreds of patients. Most importantly, they work, and you can start applying them today. Method 1. The practice of structured solitude. Jung discovered that most people fail to transform their relationship with loneliness because they approach it too vaguely or passively. "I'll spend more time alone" doesn't work. You need specific structure, clear intention, and gradual progression. Here is the exact protocol Jung developed, adapted for modern life. Week 1 to 2. Building basic tolerance. Start with just 10 minutes of fully structured solitude each day. Same place, same time, without any electronic devices or distractions. Your only task is to sit in silence and observe your inner experience without judgment. Don't try to meditate or achieve some special state. Simply practice being present with yourself. Jung emphasized that the first few days will be uncomfortable. You'll feel anxious, bored, and have a compulsive need to do something else. This is completely normal and actually a positive sign. It means you're beginning to detox from your dependence on external stimulation. Week 3 to 4. Introducing intentional reflection. Keep the 10 minutes of silence, but add 5 minutes of structured reflection at the end. Jung suggests 3 simple questions. What am I feeling right now and why? What experience from my day impacted me the most? And what does it reveal about me? If I could give myself one piece of advice right now, what would it be? Write your answers in a journal dedicated exclusively to this practice. Weeks 5 to 8. Developing inner dialogue. Expand to 20 minutes total. 10 of silence, 10 of active reflection. Jung introduced here what he called conversations with different aspects of yourself. Identify different voices or aspects of your personality, the inner critic, the dreamer, the pragmatist, the creative, and practice having constructive conversations with them. For example, if you're facing a difficult decision, instead of ruminating anxiously, structure a dialogue. What does my pragmatic side think about this? What does my creative side suggest? How can these different perspectives work together? Method 2. Mapping the interior landscape. Jung observed that most people are strangers to their own emotional and psychological geography. This method helps you develop what he called a cartography of the self, a detailed map of your own internal patterns. Weekly inner observer exercise. Once a week, dedicate 30-60 minutes to doing a structured internal inventory. Emotional mapping. Identify the 3 to 5 emotions you most frequently experience during the week. For each emotion, explore. When did it emerge? What triggered it? How did you respond to it? What might it be trying to communicate to you? Energy mapping. Notice when you felt most alive and authentic during the week versus when you felt drained or performative. What patterns can you identify? What activities, people, or situations consistently energize versus deplete you? Values. Mapping. Identify moments during the week when you felt most aligned with your values versus moments when you felt you were betraying yourself. What does this reveal about what you truly value versus what you think you should value? Jung found that people who consistently practice este mapping gradually develop extraordinary self-awareness, emotional intelligence. Method 3. The art of active imagination. One of the most powerful techniques Jung developed is active imagination, a method of consciously engaging with your unconscious through structured dialogue with symbols, images, and figures that emerge during solitude. Basic protocol. During your periods of solitude, after establishing silence and presence, allow images or symbols to emerge naturally in your mind. It could be a person, an animal, an object, a landscape, whatever appears. Instead of dismissing these images as just imagination, treat them as real and engage in dialogue. For example, if an image of a wolf emerges, Jung would encourage you to ask, "Who are you? What do you represent in my life? What message do you have for me?" Then listen for responses that emerge and continue the conversation. Jung found que este process provides accesso to wisdom e insights que não are available através de rational thinking alone. The key is treat este dialogue seriously while maintaining conscious awareness que you're engaging in deliberate psychological exercise. Method 4. Integration through creative expression. Jung discovered that insights gained through solitude need to be expressed and integrated through creative action to become genuinely transformative. He recommended that people develop some form of creative expression, writing, drawing, music, dance, crafting, specifically to process and integrate what they discovered during solitude. Practical exercise. Choose a form of creative expression that doesn't require special skills or equipment. After each period of structured solitude, spend 5 to 10 minutes expressing whatever emerged during your reflection through this medium. Don't worry about quality or technique. This is purely for integration and processing. A businessman que Jung worked with used simple sketching. After cada session de solitude, Ellie would draw abstract representations to whatever emotions or insights emerged. Over months, Este's drawings became a visual record de seu journey interior. He helped him identify patterns and themes que weren't obvious, purely através de verbal reflection. Method 5. Building community around solitude. Paradoxically, Jung found that sustainable solitude practice often requires community support. Ele recommend finding ou creating alguma forma de community, whether formal group, close friend, ou mentor, with whom você pode share insights e challenges from your solitude practice. Practical implementation. Consider sharing selected insights from your solitude practice com uma pessoa trusted in your life. Not every session needs ser shared, mas regular sharing prevents solitude from becoming isolation. It provides external perspective on your internal discoveries. Some people create solitude partnerships, onde duas pessoas commit to parallel practices e meet weekly para share experiences. Others join contemplative communities who work with therapists who understand value to solitude work. The integration challenge. Jung's final method é what ele called living from center, gradually bringing insights e authenticity discovered in solitude into your daily interactions and decisions. This is often the most challenging part porque it requires courage para be genuinely yourself in world, que often rewards performance over authenticity. Start small. Identify uma área de your life onde você feels safe practicing increased authenticity based on what you've discovered in solitude. Maybe it's being more honest about your preferences in casual conversations. You making decisions based on internal guidance rather than external expectations. Estes methods work, mas they require commitment and patience. Jung warned that transforming your relationship with solitude é lifelong journey, not uma quick fix. Mas the benefits begin almost immediately, and they compound over time in ways that can fundamentally transform how você experience being alive. Carl Jung said, "Your vision becomes clear when você look into your heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." Esta quote encapsula everything we've explored sobre o perigo oculto da solidão e its transformation into profound personal power. Não é about avoiding people ou becoming hermit. É about developing capacity para genuine intimacy with yourself, which paradoxically enables deeper intimacy with others. The fundamental choice before you. Neste momento, você stands at uma crossroads que Jung considered among most important choices uma person can make. You can continue living in what Jung called unconscious mass-mindedness, constantly seeking external stimulation, validation, e direction, gradually losing touch com who você really são underneath all social masks e expectations. Or você pode choose path que Jung called individuation, conscious development de authentic selfhood através de courageously facing your own solitude, learning para be genuinely present com yourself, e gradually building uma life based on internal authentic direction rather que external compulsions. Transformative recap. Jung's discovery about hidden danger de solitude wasn't meant para frighten você. It was meant para liberate você. When você understand difference between pathological isolation, fugir from yourself, e creative solitude, moving toward yourself, você gain power para transform one de most painful aspects de human experience into one de most nourishing. The signs de pathological isolation, chronic anxiety when alone, inability para make decisions without external validation, superficial relationships, sense de living someone else's life. These aren't permanent character flaws. They're symptoms de disconnection from your own inner guidance system. E that disconnection é completely reversible através de structured, intentional solitude practice. When you develop the capacity for creative solitude, everything changes. Your relationships become deeper because you bring your authentic self to them rather than performance. Your decisions become clearer because they emerge from internal wisdom rather than external pressure. Your creativity flourishes because you provide space for genuine inspiration to emerge. Your sense of purpose clarifies because you connect with what truly matters to you personally. Your 30-day solitude transformation challenge. Here is your specific challenge for the next 30 days, designed to begin transforming your relationship with solitude from dangerous to powerful. Week 1. Building basic tolerance. 10 minutes daily structured solitude. Same time, same place, no devices. Simply practice being present, calm yourself without judgment. Track your experience. What discomfort arises? When does it begin para soften? Week 2. Adding reflection. Continue 10 minutes of silence, add 5 minutes of structured reflection. 3 questions. What am I feeling or why? What experience today most impacted me? What advice would I give myself? Begin journal specifically for these insights. Week 3. Developing internal dialogue. Expand for 20 minutes total. Practice having constructive conversations between different aspects de yourself. Focus on integration rather que internal conflict. Week 4. Creative integration. Add 10 minutes to creative expression after reflection. Could be writing, drawing, movement, whatever feels natural. Focus on expressing insights rather que creating good art. Promise. Jung made. Jung promised que anyone who courageously undertakes authentic solitude work will discover something extraordinary. You'll realize que you're far more interesting, creative, wise, and capable que you ever imagined. The person you are quando stripped de all social masks y expectations, and not less que who você pretende para be. It's infinitely more. But Jung also warned, this work requires genuine courage. It means facing aspects to yourself que you've been avoiding. It means taking responsibility para your own inner life, rather que constantly seeking distractions. It means risking disappointment to others who've become accustomed para your performance of who they expect você para be. Your defining choice. The hidden danger de solitude que Jung identified isn't in being alone. It's in being alienated from yourself while surrounded poor people y activities. The path forward requires choosing authentic solitude over compulsive connection, choosing internal guidance over external validation, choosing para become who você really so, rather que who others expect você para be. Jung said, the most terrifying thing é para accept oneself completely. But ele also said, the most liberating thing é para accept oneself completely. Your solitude isn't your enemy. When approached consciously, deliberately, estructuradamente, it's your greatest teacher, your most reliable guide, and your pathway para becoming genuinely yourself. If Jung's insights about transforming solitude resonate com você, commit para action immediately. Choose your daily solitude time agora. When and where will você begin this practice? Write it down. Tell someone you trust about this commitment. I choose conscious solitude. Share this video com someone who needs para hear Jung's message about transforming their relationship com being alone. Remember Jung's promise. When you learn to be genuinely present with yourself, you discover that you're never truly alone. You have access to a source of wisdom, creativity, and guidance that is always available, always reliable, always uniquely yours. Your journey toward authentic selfhood through conscious solitude begins now.